you know, instructing is one of the last things that'll go back to being in person, but I just didn't know if there was an official line.
I haven't heard one. I haven't heard anybody step forward and say, we see the beginning of the end.
So at this point, we are going to remain remote until we do receive further information. I know the organization as a whole has been pretty consistent with reinforcing. We're not going to shift one division or region until we can shift across the entire country. So we will wait until we have further directive there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, to those of you watching the recording, I apologize. I neglected to start the recording earlier, but oh well, you didn't miss a whole lot. Let's just say that. Now we're getting into the meat of the workload rebalancing project. These are the things that we talked about last month. Is there anyone who would like to talk about a conversation around workload rebalancing? Okay, moving on to the next slide on this subject.
We have a hand raised.
Oh, go ahead.
We have Karen Wood.
I didn't want to leave you hanging there, Keith, so I just
thanks, Karen.
But I did talk to both of mine, and we did have a conversation about, what I could do for them and, how much work I wanted and stuff like that. And it went really well, and I'm happy with what I have. So it was good to have the conversation.
Excellent. Thank you. And the important thing, as you said, is to make sure you're happy with what you have and your staff partner is happy with what they have. There is no one formula where 59% of the work has to be here and the other 41 has to be there. It's whatever works for you guys. The important thing is to make sure the work gets done and that both the staff member and the volunteer like the workload they have. So good. Glad to hear that.
John Vale has his hand up.
John Vale.
Hey, Keith. Karen, by the way, amazing logistics lead. And, she definitely helps me balance my workload in that area. Hey, question, though, especially looking at our activities that might have territory level leads. Should those territory level leads be having maybe a conversation with their regional leads as well about workload rebalancing? Because I know sometimes, some of those leads at the smaller level may not be getting as much of the workload or that volunteer experience they're looking for either.
Mm-hmm. Excellent point. We haven't directed the DWEED hasn't directed anything directly at the territory leads because they're probably still trying to figure out who's in which territory. But one of the things I'm asking you, regional program leads, to do is to, just as you're having this conversation with your partners, think about, if you have territory leads or former chapter leads, their situation. It's it's sort of interesting because imagine you're a territory lead and you're in territory 1. So John or Melissa is your staff partner. But if you work in, say, I don't know, logistics, well, Cam is the manager of logistics. So which staff partner does a territory lead talk to? It can get a little three-dimensional. So what I would ask regional leads to do as they look down at their territory leads is to have that conversation with both the regional manager and the territory manager, so that it's a bigger conversation, but the workload distribution will be different that way. It's a really excellent point by John to make sure that you consider that. We like to think that the territories design their activities around exactly what the territory needs, to the exclusion of all else, but there is a lot of standardization. There is a lot of push from above for everybody to do things sort of the same way. So it's better, I think, if the territory lead and the regional lead have this conversation with both the territory manager and the program manager, who may or may not be the same person. So I encourage you to have regular conversations. It wasn't a one-time deal. And talk about in general how the relationship between the lead and the manager can continue to grow. It might be the lead is invited to meetings the manager goes to, or vice versa. It might be that one person shadows the other in part of their unique responsibilities. Oh, rats, this is not the latest version of this slide because I fixed that typo, but key current issues like chapter to territory, not only just in general for the good of the relationship, but also things that are happening right now. Your DPM or DPS is doing 47 things and you have some available capacity. Talk to him or her about what part of his or her job you can help them with. Whatever is going on in your territory or whatever is going on in the life of the manager or specialist. One small education I got when I started this conversation was a surprising number of people said, I don't know who my supervisor is. I don't know who my lead is. I don't know who my manager is. And I guess I shouldn't have been surprised because that's always been a bit of an issue. That's one of the reasons that we created that organization chart that we maintain in the Disaster ENY work group share. I try to keep it current. I update it whenever I hear new news, but please understand who your supervisor is, who your manager is, and make sure your team members understand who their supervisor is, probably you. And please make sure that that information is widely distributed, because that's sort of the first step toward any kind of improvement, is understanding who the players are. An update on the migration from chapter to territory. As I mentioned, the table of organization, the org chart, has been updated, and it was updated by pure brute force. I looked at all the chapter leads, figured out what county they live in, and put them in the appropriate territory. That's probably the norm, although I'm not saying who has to be where. And if you look at the table, you'll find out that some territories have 2, other territories have none, because the lines don't exactly line up. But you'll also see there's some openings. So if you have territory teams and you're the regional program lead or manager of that activity, you need to recruit territory leads in those territories that don't have them. And you also need to reconfirm with the people who were there that they still want to be there, because it may be somebody was perfectly happy working in the chapter level, but now the territory is bigger or different, or they want to do something else. So don't assume that just because I put a name in the box that the name belongs there. So we need to make sure that we know who the existing territory leads are, and then understand how to start recruiting the rest. Those leads then have to go and do the same thing with the team members, because they're all moved around too. Somebody who was in Albany and thought of themselves as Northeastern New York now is in the same territory as Orange County. That's new. So everybody needs to understand what this reorganization does to them, so we can start to develop the teams, the leadership, and the social structure that chapters had. One question I asked last month, and I've gotten some response, is, do you want or need to have territory teams? Some activities are best done at the territory level. Some activities are best done at the regional level. Some activities will decide based on their situation at the moment. But I know who historically has and has not had territory teams, but this is an opportunity to really think about that. You know, using one that's evident, logistics. Yeah, logistics needs territory teams because they got stuff and they got trailers and so forth. Sheltering probably needs territory teams because you've got agreements for shelter facilities and stuff like that. Other things like workforce engagement, we don't need territory teams. Everything we do is at the regional level. Some of the financial stuff, some of the new RC Care stuff is better done at a regional level. So think about that. It may only be a 5-second think, but think about it and make sure you have an opinion. Well, you have an answer. You don't have to convince me. You have an answer on whether or not you need territory teams. And with that answer, we'll know, do we now have 4 people to recruit or not? The goal is to do the right thing for each activity with as much flexibility as we can. with the understanding that if we have a bunch of leadership positions that are open, somebody's going to try to fill them. So we want to make sure they really need to be filled. And you may have a new staff partner as a result of this reallocation. Let's see, people who were in Northeastern New York and are used to working with Melissa, you probably still will, because your territory now includes all of the what used to be Hudson Valley. In other cases, you work with one DPM, now you're going to be working with a different one. So if you're in that situation, make a phone call, get to know your new manager, and let's get this socialization started, because we need to make sure that we get as much done as possible. I was going to say before we might get deployed, but who knows how much time we have before we might get deployed. It could be sooner than we think.
Keith. Yeah, as Michelle Lee is actively working on deployments tonight.
Yeah.
I would love to just expand ever so slightly that this is the first step in the process. I did see a comment in the chat from Bill Pickles that the TO in the leadership group share is dated 2/5. So we may need to just double check to make sure that the territory, the one that reflects the territory structure, is up there. Please take a look at it. Like, this is our attempt to try to move it forward. But if we've got it wrong, if names are incorrect, I know there's some other conversations going on regarding the territory structure. Again, first step, this volunteer connection system is not updated yet. There are only a few activities that have been updated. So, it'll be step by step through this transition. Thanks, Keith.
Thank you, as always. Yeah, it may take a while. It may, there's a lot of socialization, and there may be some resistance or some confusion about how we reorganize now. I used the example last month of me, for example. When I joined the Red Cross, I was in a 6-county chapter, which became an 8-county chapter, which is now a 14-county territory. Things are changing around here, and that could be uncomfortable, but it really is important for us as leads to model the behavior of being flexible, of understanding what's happening, and to do as much as we can to get the transition over as quickly as possible. It'll be fine when we get there, but the transition is always a little disturbing to a lot of us. Oh, and for the record, this is the map. This is the best representation yet written, comparing chapters and territories. You'll notice that there are 3 chapters. Central and Northern is in blue on the left. Northeastern New York is in red in the center. And Hudson Valley is surrounded by yellow at the bottom. And you'll also see the individual counties are colored in based on their territories. So Territory 1 is that big blue stripe in the southeast. Territory 2 is over in the southwest. Territory 3 is right in the middle. And Territory 4 is in the north. So you can see you might be in the same chapter as somebody, but not the same territory. In another way, it can be a little confusing. But we will forge ahead, and once we understand what's going on, and we've got the leaders in place, and the team members understand what's going on, a lot of the other stuff will flow. I wanted to take a minute and talk about specialty tracks, because it's not really a well understood aspect of our assignment as volunteer responders. You probably understand what a GAP is, a group activity position, where I am in mass care, sheltering, and I'm a service associate, or if I want to work in health services, or if I want to work in DST, or wherever, I take training and I earn a GAP. And that's the main line, the mainstream way that we become disaster responders and put out there what activities we're interested in and qualified to do. But there's another subcategory in there, not necessarily related to a gap, called a specialty track. You probably have heard this term, depending on your own background, you heard this term a lot last summer during the seasonal readiness campaign, because if you were an experienced shelter worker or an experienced healthcare worker, you had to take those 2 COVID courses, and you got a little indicator in your profile that says good to go for COVID. That indicator was a specialty track. An identifier in your profile that says, in addition to whatever gaps you hold, there's a particular skill or a particular role that you are qualified to fill on a disaster relief operation, a DR. I was not aware until I saw the latest list from National that there's a boatload of these things. So at another meeting we were at, we thought it might be appropriate to let you guys know and hopefully share with your teams that there are a lot of specific qualifications people might want to pursue. Some of them have been around forever. Some of them are relatively new, but I've seen working staff services on DRs. I've seen teams put in a staff request. I specifically want somebody with this specialty track. And that goes up in the system where deployment people go and find these requests. So if there is a specialty that you want to advertise as something you want to deploy in, you should consider pursuing one or more of these specialty tracks. This first page, and it's only the first page, is the specialty tracks that can be assigned by a region. Some of them are familiar, like IRV driver, forklift operator, ICCT. Others of them are probably new, or maybe you didn't realize there was an actual official name for it. You know, like some of the new RC Care stuff is here, virtual call center stuff is here, duty officer, and there's some other things that might be of interest to you or to some of your team members. I'm looking specifically at the mass care kitchen site management, mass care shelter site management, unsolicited donations management. My interest in this kicked off a couple of weeks ago because a volunteer asked, how do I get to be a shelter manager? So I said, well, do you mean the shelter manager gap, or do you mean you'll want to be the manager at a shelter site? And the answer was the shelter site. Come to find out, we're not talking about the shelter manager gap, because in my experience, that puts you in a headquarters, and that may or may not be what you really want. Whereas a mass care shelter site management specialty track will put you at the site. So that was interesting. So I present to you, and you'll have these in the slides when I distribute them, and I'll also distribute you the complete document with all the training requirements and stuff. But this is the list of specialty tracks you can pursue. Write to Disaster Support ENY and get assigned to you. But wait, there's more. This is the first of 2 pages of additional specialty tracks that are assigned by National. And, you know, when you get this document, you'll see how to pursue them if you're interested. But there's a pretty wide variety of different stuff here that might interest you, that might be something you want to do. Perhaps you like data analytics. There's a place for you in the Situational Awareness Decision Support, SADS. Maybe you want to supervise a client care center. Maybe you want to work in Latino engagement. Maybe you want to be a lodging specialist. I didn't know there was a specialty track for that. And I've done that job. I have to decide if I want it, because I may or may not ever want to do it again, but it's there. The Division Response Management Team, the DRMT, has been getting some publicity lately because it's a package of really experienced and skilled responders who can be dispatched as a unit at the very, very beginning of a DR. So if you have extensive experience, that might interest you. Moving to page 2, there's a bunch more. So these are all opportunities for you to, yes, thank you, Michelle. I am so good at it. So these are all opportunities you might be interested in pursuing, or you should bring to your teams and make them available. Because some of these are big jobs. Some of these are important jobs that people may not realize even exist in any official capacity. What if you want to do that? Well, you should earn the specialty track, get it on your profile, and then when deployment time comes, we'll know you can do it and we'll be able to match you up. So that's the story about specialty tracks. There are a lot of them. A lot of them are very interesting. When you get the document, take a look, see if any interest you. Any questions or comments on specialty tracks?
This is Maureen. I have a question. Are we planning on tracking all of these, some of these?
There is an open question as to exactly what the deployment team can see when they deploy people. So that's a work in progress.
Okay.
All I wanted to do now was raise awareness of the fact that they exist. I suspect a couple of them will be really popular, and and the people will tell us with their interest which of these are really important and which aren't.
Well, I asked because we have, Michelle and I talked about this earlier today. If you went back to the first one, we have some people who are interested in some of those specialty tracks. Mm-hmm. And for example, we've got a few forklift people, and that's really important to them. And I don't know that we've been noting that in their profiles, which is why I asked.
Right. There may be people who are already qualified, but we haven't awarded. Yeah. And that should probably be one of the first calls to action. If you are a forklift operator, if you've driven a forklift or not, apply for it.
Well, no, they have to have had some classes.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you drive it well. But yeah, there may be people. I may be a qualified lodging specialist, Lord help me, I don't know. So yeah, first, if there's something you think you're already qualified for or almost there, let's look at the training requirements and do a match. Unfortunately, we might find that some popular specialty tracks require training that is rarely offered. So because we can't. I think forklift operators is an example of that.
I'm thinking of, I know we have forklift operators. We've never, as far as I know, we've never tracked that. So I can run a report and then we could give them that. So there are a few where we might know we have people and we just want to run a report and then add that. I didn't know if we were tracking them.
I think we're going to ask people to start letting us know. I mean, we can look at the training requirements and what training they have, and I don't suppose there's such a thing as a specialty track promotions manager.
Oh no, there isn't. Yeah, it's
of course not.
Yeah, it's a problem. Gary you think they've tracked the forklift already?
Yes, as a specialty track.
So is that on your profile? Do you know?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good. Okay, I didn't realize we had them in.
So now you have a forklift instructor.
Oh, I know. We just don't have a forklift for him to test with.
Oh. Call logistics, fill out a 6409.
Right.
On a forklift. Okay. Moving to the next part of the evening, a brief educational moment on developing leaders. And what I'm talking about here is not your leadership development, but primarily how you as a team leader look at your team members and identify and prepare them to become leaders. There may be people on your team who are sort of leaders without title, or there may be people on your team who you think have the capacity and the skills to be a good leader. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. First, with some basic information, why it's important. We need leaders to get the job done. We need organizers, we need coordinators, we need managers, we need team leaders. It's essential to get the job done. And a lot of people volunteer in the Red Cross with no interest whatsoever at being a leader. So it's not a simple job to fill in a lot of cases. But we do have some logically required or actually officially required jobs that we must fill. We must have a mass care regional program lead. We must have a logistics lead. It's in the chart. We got to do it. But there are a lot of other positions that maybe aren't officially required, but are really, really important. So as we look around and say, as we look around and say, who's in charge here? It may be that there's an open position there and we need to fill it. Building capacity, the more leaders we have, the more people qualified to be leaders, the more bench strength we have, the better off we are in a busy season where 95% of the workforce is deployed, or where our key leader is unavailable for a while. Wouldn't it be nice if there were a backup who could jump right in and fill the gap? So building capacity in all directions is an important reason why we want to identify people who might be good leaders. And finally, people who want to become leaders as their path, as their career path, if you will. They need somebody to identify them and work with them to find out how that's done. How do I become a leader in the Red Cross? So you'll also improve the satisfaction of your team members who are interested in that by helping them and showing them the way to get where they want to be. So it's our responsibility as program leads to identify potential future leaders. And in a minute, I'll talk about some of the criteria we might use to identify them. When we find an interested volunteer who we think is a good candidate, there are things we can do to help them develop the skills, get the experience they need, and position them to become a leader. And that includes things like delegating responsibility to them, letting them run projects, letting them take leadership positions, empowering them to think on their own and make their own decisions, and possibly some form of apprenticeship where, you run the next meeting, or there's something else coming up. I'm going to be out of town for a month. You run it. Or have the prospective leader work with an existing leader to see how things are done. All these things are just a small sample of things we can do to help give opportunities to people who want to become leaders. And once we feel that this candidate is ready, it's also our responsibility to advocate for that candidate. And by that, I mean help that person find an open position, find an opportunity. If it's a promotion, if it's a gap promotion as part of this, help them with the forms, write the recommendation letter, talk to the people who are making decisions, and let them know how much you think this person is ready. Because as an existing experienced leader, your opinion really matters. One thing we can do to identify a volunteer who might be ready to move into a leadership position is to observe their behavior. First of all, volunteers who are ready to be promoted will probably say so. You may have to ask them. You may have to bring the subject up in a performance review or in a casual conversation. But if I want to be a leader and somebody asks me about that, I will explain, yes, this is what I want to do. Somebody who's ready to be a leader is already exhibiting some leadership traits, like taking initiative, seeing the ball on the ground, picking it up and running with it, suggesting projects, running projects, doing things that otherwise maybe wouldn't be done. But this person steps up outside of his or her official title and takes the initiative to get something moving. People who are ready to be leaders ask a lot of questions, and they ask good questions that exemplify the fact that they know a lot and they want to know more. People who are always looking to learn more generally are good candidates to consider moving up in the organization. Leaders offer solutions and solve problems well. There is always a problem to be solved, and while people are running away from it, who's the one who steps in and tries to figure it out? Good leaders follow through. They keep their commitments. They honor their word. If they say they're going to do something, it gets done. They care about meeting and evaluating results. Now, results is a multifaceted word, particularly in a big organization like the Red Cross. A result might be a statistic, it might be a number, it might be a dashboard, or it might be this task finally got done. This upset volunteer is now happy. We have organized the stuff. We have ranked the possibilities, whatever the job is. Good leaders want to get the job done. Also, leaders have to, one of the things that we teach leaders is how to provide feedback, how to provide evaluations to volunteers. And a good volunteer takes that feedback and improves, takes the advice, uses the positive feedback they receive, and works to improve their performance. Somebody who takes feedback seriously will probably be pretty good at giving it. So that's a leadership trait. Somebody who thinks feedback is useless or offensive or never believes a word anybody says, they probably won't do a whole lot better on the other side of the conversation. Volunteers who are ready to move up demonstrate emotional intelligence and agility. One of my favorite memories from Hurricane Michael in Florida. It was my first deployment as staff services, and I was in the DR headquarters, and a lot of people milling around. They just got a fresh bunch of people in, and the chief came to me and said, "I want you to go to district headquarters out in Tallahassee." And I said, "I'd love to, but you do realize this is my first deployment in staff services." And she said, "Yeah, but you seem stable." I guess that was the criterion for that field promotion. She needed somebody stable, and I was it. Just let that sink in for a minute. I was the most stable person in the room. But maybe what she saw was intelligence and agility. I like that better than stable. Good volunteers who are ready to move up are already showing the leadership behavior of listening. We know how important communication is, and we especially know as a leader how important it is to listen what your team members are telling you. And somebody who's ready to become a leader is already doing that, as well as mentoring and coaching. If somebody is a subject matter expert, even without a leadership title, that person is probably exhibiting leadership behavior by explaining technical things or teaching people how to do various tasks. There are also some things you can use when you observe your team operating to identify people as the leader. Sometimes one person just naturally emerges as the leader. When you give an assignment to the team and they're getting started, maybe one person just becomes the unofficial leader. Now, there are people who insist on becoming the leader, whether they're good at it or not. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is the person who naturally just comes in and sort of gets things going and resolves disputes and gets questions answered and things like that. Sometimes the members of the team will just look to a particular person who's done this before and expect them to be the leader. Now, this person may not have a leadership title, but it's just the natural team member to take over. That person is well on their way to becoming a leader. Somebody who just naturally helps the group get going, just naturally, not because it's their job and not even necessarily because you've assigned it to them, but because it's just what they do. That you'll be able to observe by watching how your team operates. Does a person command respect through their knowledge, skills, and attitude? People can command respect through one or another, but a true leader will have all three. I know what's supposed to be done. That's knowledge. I can do it. That's a skill. And I maintain positive relationships and do it in a Red Cross way. That's attitude. And a good leader will command respect by their mastery of all three. You'll also see as your team interacts some of the qualities you see here, a lot of what we call is leadership attributes: commitment, integrity, fairness. You'll see a natural leader sort of rise to the top, if you will, and become evident in the interactions amongst your team. The person that keeps the group focused on results, resolve the petty disputes, don't panic, don't give up, let's just keep going here, is a leadership attribute. Communication, handling challenges and problems, communicating well, and involving the right other people. Remember that a leader in a leadership role will be delegating, will be making assignments to other people. There may be somebody on your team who already does that, who's just sort of the natural organizer of the group and gets people, divides up the work and gets people to happily sign up. If you observe that on your team, that person might be a good future leader. So through these mechanisms or others, you have identified somebody on your team who's got leadership potential. Maybe this person is already an experienced leader in another venue. Maybe a manager in their career, or a manager in another not-for-profit or volunteer organization, or a person who is already a proven leader somewhere else. We've got to find out if this person is interested in becoming a leader in the Red Cross. Some people are, some people aren't. Some very high-level business people join the Red Cross just to be on a team. So don't assume that a corporate leader necessarily wants to be a Red Cross leader. But if the potential leader expresses interest, it's important for us as program leads, as their supervisors, to sit down and talk about it. Don't wait for them to ask, because a lot of people never will. But if you bring the topic up with the group or with an individual, the conversation might begin. And talk about, what leadership means in the Red Cross in general. If you're talking about somebody on your team who is interested in moving up, maybe to a supervisor gap in your activity, the pathway documents are really good ways, or the training requirements book is a really good way to start that conversation, to break that ice, and to start looking at what's necessary to move into a leadership position. In a lot of cases, the best approach is to develop a plan. Now, the volunteer development plan, it's a form, and the form is not the important part. But the good part about the form, about the tool, about the template, is that it gives you a very simple set of information to work off of to help the volunteer move forward. The point of volunteer development planning is to find out what the candidate wants to do, match it up with what the Red Cross needs them to do, and put a plan together to get the volunteer where he or she wants to be. It's not a cookie cutter thing like the pathway documents or the training requirements book. It's a personalized plan. You want to do this. Here's how we get you there. And it's really a conversation starter. It's a way to make sure we cover the important information and put it down on paper so that we can track and make sure that the candidate is moving forward. Talk about what your short-term, what you want to do, long-term, what you want to do. This technique is all very similar to what's done in the business world, where we talk about careers. So in the Red Cross, you don't have a career, but your volunteer path, your stay here, has a lot of things in common with a career. And this part of the development process is one of them. So if we understand what the candidate eventually wants to do, someday I want to be a mass care chief. That's what I want to do. That's probably pretty long term. Short term, I'd like to be a mass care supervisor. That's shorter term. Okay, this is what you want to do. What do you have to do? And this is a conversation with you and them. What do you have to do to get there? Well, there's training you need to take. There's experience you want to have. You want to deploy a couple of times. You want to read this book. You want to go to this exercise, whatever. Because you know you're already probably where they want to be. You know what it took. And you can provide some firsthand information on, based on what the volunteer wants to be, what they have to do to get there. Once you've identified the things that they have to do, they have to add to their toolbox. Now, how do we put the volunteer in a position to get that training, to get that experience? If part of the answer is you really ought to deploy soon, what can you as their supervisor do to put them in a position where they can deploy soon? Get the availability done, get the gap earned if you have to, give the volunteer what they need to become eligible for the opportunity they need to get to where they want to be. Now, in some cases, it might be that you create an opportunity. If somebody needs practice in loading a trailer and you're in logistics, maybe you put together a meeting where you practice loading trailers. You can do that. Or you can work with your fellow supervisors to do that. And then identify any other things beyond training and skill building that your volunteer candidate might need. And once you put the plan together, this is what you've got, this is what you need, this is what you ought to do to get there. Talk about it every once in a while and make sure it's progressing. The work is supposed to be on the candidate, but providing the opportunities by and large might be on you. So the two of you should talk to make sure things are moving forward. I'm going to show you the form. It's not difficult, it's not complicated, and if you don't like it, that's fine, do something else. But again, the purpose of the form is to give you an outline of what to talk about. Get basic information about the volunteer, which you probably already know, and now talk. Okay, what do you already know? What skills, what abilities do you already have? And encourage the volunteer to think about that and start writing stuff down. Tell me what you're already good at. Tell me what you are maybe uniquely good at, what you're proud of, what people have said you're good at, and build a list of the volunteer's current abilities, current competencies. That is what you got. Next, where do you want to go? What are your goals? And the goal could be very specific. I want to be a mass care chief by the 2015 DR season. No, 2025 DR season. Or they might be pretty general. I'd like to someday, I'd like to be a leader somewhere. Whatever it is that the worker wants to do, that's their goal. And given the goal, what are the steps to get there? And how do you know if you're successful? You know, I want to be good at something. Well, how do you know when you're good at something? Maybe you earn a gap. Maybe you pass a test. Maybe you successfully lead a project. But yeah, think about, now that we know what you want to do, how do we know when you're good at it? Sometimes it's easy. I want to be a mass care chief. That's a gap. You know the minute you're successful at that. So we know what you got. We know what you want to do. The next thing is, how do you get there? What are the requirements? There may be courses you need to take. You may need to get one of those specialty tracks. You may need experience to turn a supervisor gap. You need 2 positive recommendations from 2 prior DRs. That's clear. You need that. You only got one, you need another one. You need training courses. You know, before you can teach forklift operating, you got to be a pretty good forklift operator. You got to go do that. So put together a plan based on what they've got and where they want to go. Put together a list of what they need to do. And once you've put the list together, you're going to help them do it. You're going to help them find that training. Maybe you're going to run a meeting or an exercise that provides the skills or knowledge that this worker needs, and probably the rest of your team too, right? With the understanding you've gained as a result of this conversation, you'll have a pretty good idea of what events have to occur for this volunteer to get what they want. And by the way, by becoming a better leader, the Red Cross benefits as well. You benefit as well, because now you've got a leader on your team who maybe can sit in for you when you're not available. Maybe you can deploy more because you know you've got a backup. Or maybe that new leader is going to be your replacement because you'd rather go do something else. For all these reasons and a lot more, you really ought to consider this planning process in dealing with a member of your team who might be interested in becoming a leader and whom you think has the beginnings of the abilities, the knowledge, skills, and attitude that they need in order to be successful there. Any comments, any questions, anything else we can talk about on this topic?
Keith?
Yes.
Are you going to highlight the conversation we had earlier this week regarding operational leadership and a pathway to that?
Oh, Michelle. Yes. And there it
look
is.
at you.
We did not talk about this ahead of time. But yes, let's do that. Again, as a result of a meeting we attended last week, great meeting, learned a lot. But one thing that came up was, what is a volunteer's path to operations management? What if I want to be a job director, maybe an AD of logistics or whatever? How do I do that? Well, if you want to be an operational leader on DRs, there's basically 2 ways to do it. The first way, if you want to be a leader in your activity, earn a supervisor gap, earn a manager gap, earn a chief gap, And when you deploy, you'll probably be put in a leadership position. But what if it's not in your activity? What if you want to be a director? What if you want to be one of those operational management types? It may interest you to know that you do not need to be a supervisor or manager or chief in your activity to qualify for that job. It's a job in itself. It's an activity in itself. So you could be in sheltering, you could be in feeding, you could be in logistics, you could be in operations management. There is training there. It's in the training requirements book. It's all laid out how to do it. So no matter what position you hold or what gap you hold or what specialty or what activity you're in, if you're interested in this kind of work, you can pursue the entry-level operations manager gap, which is operations manager generalist supervisor. It starts at supervisor. And typically you find people at that level doing things like a district director, a site director, meaningful leadership jobs. The next promotion after that is operations management generalist manager, where you might be in a bigger, more responsible role on a DR. From that point forward, you're looking at possibilities or opportunities to be an AD, an assistant director. And I've listed the 6 that are in the documentation. There may even be more by now. I don't know. But, you know, if you've ever wondered who is the person absolutely at the top of the heap when it comes to logistics, or who is the ultimate boss of staff services and workforce, it's the assistant director, a person who reports directly to the job director. How do you get there? Now you see it. Take the training, earn the gaps, and have the experience, and you can move into one of those positions and eventually become a deputy director or even a job director. There is a misconception that all of these jobs are restricted and limited only to employees. That's not true. It happens that often employees get those jobs because they have spent the time, because, you know, it's their job, to get the experience, to get the education, and to get the immersion in these kinds of activities that an assistant director needs. But there are, I know of at least 2 volunteers in our region who have served in AD roles. There are probably others. Those jobs are important. They're available. And if you're interested in them, this is the path you follow to pursue it. So if you're interested, grab that training requirements document, find out what it takes to become an operations management generalist supervisor, and have at it. Any questions or comments on that?
Keith, I have one. This is Mary Walker. Is there any opportunity to mentor someone in that role before taking on the role?
You mean for you to have
to be mentored? Yes, I'm sorry, to be mentored.
Yes. Well, here's the deal. The perfect opportunity to do that, and I don't wish anybody harm, would be if we had a regional DR where, yeah, it's relatively small scale, everybody knows everybody, and you can do that. But even if you are deployed to a larger DR, if you're a manager, and you are, and you express interest in that, I would suggest you try to set that up. Locally, not during a DR, I would suggest contacting one of our staff members who served in operations management. I know Josh has done a variety of things, including being a job director, so he'd be a really good person to ask for advice and mentoring. I know Michelle has been an assistant director of workforce. I know I think most of the staff was involved in operations management at the DR in Utica. So pretty much anybody in the DPX staff might be able to help you get on board and get started with that.
The other, Mary, if you or you know of somebody who is interested in a mentoring opportunity like that, let me know and we can try to put our feelers out with the DRs to see if there's an opportunity to connect you with an existing DR and get you assigned in that capacity.
Thanks, Michelle.
Absolutely.
Okay, and finally, our list of monthly reminders, which haven't changed much, if at all. Make sure that you are subscribed to nightly updates and all the group shares that you care about, including the two listed here, Disaster Leadership and Disaster Workforce ENY. Also, you're already enrolled by virtue of your positions, but you have to go in and overtly click the box or check the box to say you want to get nightly updates. I have nightly updates on for all of mine, and I haven't gotten a lot of emails lately. I guess things haven't been updated all that much. So you don't get deluge in emails. You get one email a day maximum with all of the updates and all of your group shares. So it's worth doing to keep current. Pages and toolkits and hubs and things that are on the exchange, you want to make sure you subscribe to those so you get latest information and doctrine, particularly as we approach disaster season. I'm sure there's new COVID doctrine being written, and that affects sheltering and health services and lots of other things. So you want to stay current on that stuff. And one easy way to do that is to subscribe to the pages and hubs and toolkits that are appropriate to your job. Supervising the disaster workforce is always a good course to take. If you don't have a supervisor gap in your chosen activity, you should pursue it. For one of many reasons, the conversation we just had. If somebody on your team came to you tomorrow and said, how do I become a supervisor? You would have the answer if you were a supervisor yourself. And so that's one of many reasons why you want to consider that. The pathway documents are always there in the group share to help you and your team members understand the parameters of your job and how to get promoted to supervisor. Make sure your availability is current. I saw earlier today that Liam put out a note to check your availability because there are deployments happening. If you're interested in a deployment and you're available right now, say so. If you're not interested in a deployment and you're not available right now, say that too. Make sure that the information is accurate there so the deployment team will only call the people who are probably going to say yes. And as always, keep in mind that you're not just volunteering for a geographic area. There's also a box on the list there for virtual. If you can be available to deploy virtually, indicate that as well. Enter your hours. Enter the hour and a half or so you spent here tonight. Put your hours in. Set the example for the rest of your team. And finally, if you have any questions or concerns or suggestions or requests for anybody in workforce engagement, that is the email address to use, disastersupport.eny@redcross.org. One final commercial plug. The leadership development team is gearing up to do a variety of pretty good things, and they should all benefit you. And but we do need some help. We need some people on the team to help do some of this work. So if you or anybody you know might be interested in helping to identify leadership training or helping to find things on the exchange that are leadership appropriate or helping plan leadership events, stuff like that, please pass their names on to me so we can get more hands on the job and get it done more quickly. And finally, thank you for everything you do in your leadership role. It's often not easy, but it is very much appreciated. And as you know, it's very essential to our success. And thank you for being here tonight and listening to me. Hopefully you've gotten something useful and productive out of it. So with that, is there anything else we should talk about? Any other comments, questions, suggestions?
Keith, I did put a list of our open leadership RSSTO, that's the steady state positions that we have right now in our region. So as you all are working with your teams and other volunteers, if they have expressed an interest in potential leadership, these are the positions we have right now.
Dispatch applications lead. Is that like an admin, a programmer? I don't know.
I would have to look up the position description.
Yeah. Interesting.
I think that might fall under the RAST, Regional Application Support Team.
Yep. Which one was that, Keith?
DAT Dispatch Applications Lead.
Yeah, so actually, this is a question before actually, Michelle. So maybe this could be a good question for you. I believe that the disaster action team DAT dispatch applications lead is probably going to be retired when DAT dispatch is no longer in use, because we will be rolling out RC Response. You see the RC Respond application lead at the bottom of that table. This will be a brand new position that we will be recruiting for in a couple of weeks. Because we will be implementing RC Respond, which is a new event management system. And so this will be a good position, and it is a RASP position, the Regional Application Support Team. And we have a bunch of different leads for those positions. Tim Schwob is our sheltering application lead currently, and he was integral into now the day-to-day operation of that system. So these are good positions. If you have questions, definitely reach out.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, anything else we should talk about? All right, if not, I hear my grandchildren outside. I think my birthday dinner is ready, so I'm going to go enjoy that. Thanks again, everybody, for being here. We'll talk to you soon. Have a good night.
Have a good
Happy
night,
birthday,
everyone.
Keith.
Thank you.
Night.
Thank you.
Enjoy your family, Keith.
Oh, yeah.
Bye.
Good night.
Thank you. Happy birthday, Keith.